All right, guys. So glad to see everybody here. Last book study of the year. And it's been a good one. I've really enjoyed the book, and I'm excited that everybody's here to, spend some time with us today, dialoguing. I think that, for me, these are the highlights of my every 2 weeks, and, seeing your guys' faces and sharing and, you know, relieving some stress is always a nice time. So I hope that you guys feel the same way. And I know Becky and I have been talking in the whole EC Open Chat team, and we're trying to put something together potentially for January or early 2021 with a new book study. So keep that in mind.
Two new books. The hope is we can do 2 new books. We can do a repeat of Courageous Adventures. Wow.
Upside down.
Really upside down.
First backwards, then upside down.
I want to make sure you all know.
This is 2020, right?
Yeah. And then, so for everyone who couldn't join this first go around, we had a lot of people say that they wanted to do that again. But then for everyone who did read Courageous Adventures and they don't want to read it again, we're looking at another book. So we'll have 2 different book studies going at the same time, hopefully.
Right. So if you're watching this after the fact on the recording and you're interested in, joining either of those, keep your eyes out for our Twitter or our Google chat, and we will give you guys the insight. So looks like people here are pretty excited about a new book study. I'm excited about that. So we're going to just jump in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I did want to also mention that Georgina does say hello and that she misses you guys, but she wanted me to relay a message to y'all saying, sorry she couldn't be here today, but she does love all of you and really has appreciated how much she has grown because of the conversations that have existed in this space. So she wanted me to relay her thanks and gratitude, and she'll be popping around. We'll see her around. So okay, so we're going to jump right in. We had 3 chapters this time, and they were all kind of awesome. I'd love to hear your guys' just before we get to the questions. I'd love for anybody to unmute and maybe relay some insight. I absolutely love these chapters. What did you guys think of them?
I think what struck me the most was just like the very, very final thoughts of how to go beyond, how to continually to challenge yourself, because there are times when we get to that point where it feels like, oh, we have gotten to, our max, our limit, but just that reminder that no, there's always new ways we can challenge ourselves. And so I was like, that's kind of the final takeaway that really stuck with me, because I know right now we're all probably facing challenges. We don't want to stretch our wings more and try new things right now because we might be just trying to, keep our heads above water. But I think that's an important idea to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that so much. I think you're right. I think that's been one of the things, right? Like we stress, this has been a stressful year for a lot of educators, a lot of coaches, and it's hard sometimes as a coach to go to a teacher and say, hey, how about we, push the limits here when they're already, extended. And so supporting them on that and really seeing it, as we come to the end of this journey, seeing her like Magira, like lay that out, kind of gave me a little bit of like, okay, we can do this, we can continue.
And
Any
I think
other
it's
thoughts?
important. Yeah, and I'll kind of add to that. It's really important too to also find that balance of, pushing yourself to a new limit, but also recognizing that it's okay to be in just kind of a steady spot, to just appreciate that things are better than they could be and just let them be better for a while. I think sometimes because we have a lot of pressure to feel like we don't want to lose ground because of a lot of the challenges around us. And I think also too, because, we have some really motivated people in this room. If you weren't motivated, you wouldn't be here right now. And it's very easy to feel like we have to continue forward to, I don't want to say like almost like an ego thing, but like we want to show that we can and we're better than those who are just going to sit back, right? But it's also very much a sign of quality leadership to be able to just have the confidence in a lot of the teachers we support to just step back and allow them to make some discoveries and follow up with them on how they feel they're able to push further. Because I think a lot right now. This is for America. For American teachers, this is a very welcome day right now. It's Veterans Day, and it's a day to show, appreciation for those who have, fought for so much of what we have. However, it's also the first day off that we have had since Labor Day. It's the longest stretch of the school year without a break from Labor Day to Veterans Day. And I know that we also have a lot coming up as far as holidays. A lot of school districts do the entire week off for Thanksgiving, and then you have an extended winter break. So, just for reflection, our school district, we have 7 days of school and then a week off. And then we have 3 weeks of school and then a week, and then like 2 weeks off. This is going to be a time to recharge, even though instruction continues and, learning challenges still exist. It is also the moment to come up and breathe. And I think that this is a good time as coaches for us to be able to step back and allow everybody around to just enjoy and appreciate the relationships we've built, the successes that we've had, and very slowly dip our toes into new ideas and extending our understanding. One thing I've come to understand is that there are really only 3 months where teachers are most open to grow and try new things that are fundamental shifts in instruction: August, September, and January, the months where they feel the most recharged. Right. So as much as we love to be able to kind of push our limits and our boundaries and see what's next, it's okay to enjoy the view from the top of the mountain and take a look back. And I think more than anything else, beyond extension, this is a time for reflection, and use that time. However you can, not just reflect on your own practices, but reflect with others. This is when relationships get built and become strengthened, is because you're not pushing further beyond what people's capacities are, or you're not even trying to find what that limit is. You're just able to find a place and a moment and a time to say, look how far we've come, man. I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree. I think that's a really good word. And I think that's good for a lot of us to hear that, that it is okay, and that this is a moment for reflection. For all of you that don't have today off of school, we feel for you. I hope you guys get that reprieve soon.
You'll get yours. It's coming.
Yeah.
Don't worry. You're going to have one of those days off. And I'm like, how did you pull that off? Not fair. I'm leaving this country.
I think about that all the time when the UK people talk about their midterm breaks. I'm like, oh, I wish I had that too. But thank you, Devin, for that. I think it's a really good reminder. Absolutely. So any other thoughts before we dive into question number 1? Last minute shares.
I just was going to agree with Devin that I really feel like the timing and reflecting is so important to take the time to do that. I find that this time is some of the things that we might have started in August and September, people kind of got lost along the way, and that this is a great time to go back and kind of do the catch up, do the follow up, do that third date that they, that Jenny was talking about a lot of times, that some people are very willing at this point. Feels like after that first 9 weeks and that first grading period is over, and especially during this COVID time with so much uncertainty, the idea that they get a decision whether to use technology as part of their lesson is gone now. It's not a decision anymore. They're being forced into having to do some things, and some people are more willing to than others. So I think that this is a great time to go back and try to catch them up, or just have those relationships where they can come to you and go, Sharon, I was thinking about what you said to me in August. Can we work on that now? So that's what I'm trying to do this term.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's great. Any last shares before we move on? All right. So chapter 13, it's all about evaluating our practice. And so she talks a lot in the beginning about the SAMR model, the TIM frameworks, really using those to as a quick calibration tool when we're thinking about ed tech and planning and helping our coaches along there. And then she kind of moves out into this idea where it kind of has this, vein that is interwoven in between 13, 14, and 15, all about sharing your adventure and that idea. And so that brings us to our question number 1. So it says, as a coach, we often encourage our educators to openly share, but many of us aren't willing or don't have the time to mimic the same practice. What is the value in blogging your journey? What do you think most holds you back from sharing your insight with the world? How can we use blogging to become better coaches, educators, and individuals? So would anybody like to share some insight to start us off?
Full disclosure, this is my first time looking at these questions because time is just, it's a funny thing in the age of COVID.
That's
but
okay.
You know what I think has held me back from like blogging per se, where like I update on like the daily activities more publicly, has been like my concern about protecting student privacy, and because of the culture of what is acceptable with sharing within different school districts. Depending on one's point of view, I've had the privilege of working in multiple districts, and they all have different cultures about how much you can share. So in terms of the way I've shared, the way I've done so most comfortably has been through Twitter. It's more accessible. It's a little easier to like kind of share out the day-to-day experiences, versus if I had to sit down and write like a blog post that was like even the equivalent of 1 page, I'd be like, man, I can't right now, my energy levels. But I could send out a tweet like, oh, I did this today, and it was really cool. And that's more acceptable for some reason in my mind, versus like the sit down process of blogging now. So I don't know, like, how does the group feel about that? About like, is Twitter comparable to long form blogging, or do you think there's a value in that?
I think that it's absolutely acceptable because it reaches people more where they are. And I'll say this about blogging right now. I almost feel like we're getting to a saturation point with blogs, kind of like we are with podcasts, where everybody has one and none of them stand out. I actually have a really unique perspective from blogging because a blog I used to run actually did get some meaningful traction about 10 years ago. It was actually kind of the gateway into education. I credit it with getting my first job. It was called A Year Without Football. It was around a time where I was transitioning from sports broadcasting into teaching. And my college, Northeastern University, where I had called a lot of the sports as an undergrad, had dropped football as a Division I sport. And it was a very controversial move. And people were like, how could you be a college and drop football? This is America's favorite sport. It's the biggest sport. And it was like, it was really easy. We only got like 2,000 people to show up at our games. It was super expensive. We got outdrawn by the local high school. So it was an easy call. And if we could spend more money. But anyway, it caught my attention because like there's so many other things happening in sports, but everybody just focused on football. So I wanted to see what it was like. Anyway, it picked up because it had a unique wrinkle to it. It actually paired nicely because at the same time I was going through this year, it was also when we found out we were going to be parents for the first time. So it was almost like this transition from sports to education, from just being on your own to fatherhood. But it was defined. I was not going to have this be an intermittent, permanent, forever thing. It was 1 year. And that allowed me to commit more to it because I knew that there was a purpose, a beginning, and a defined end. It was going to go Hall of Fame game to NFL draft. And so because it had a unique lens and it had defined end points, I felt like I was more able to commit to it because it wasn't just going to be this for everything that I gave up on. And so if blogging or, running like a perspective podcast or vlog is appealing, I would say that. I would say be very precise about what it is that you're writing about. What is the wrinkle? What is unique about your experience, your lens that is going to appeal to a lot of people as far as how they're approaching things? So I would just put that out there that it's easy to manage time if you know that there is a point where you get to say, all right, it's done.
I was thinking, I think it's interesting, this idea of like putting time on things or looking at what perhaps might be the best place to reach a particular audience. I don't know that that is my goal when and if I blog. I think that if I am talking to a person and I'm trying to model what I'm asking, it really is kind of cathartic sometimes to put words to paper, to get ideas out. The way that I moved into starting to blog, and it's been a while since I've done a post, and but I had to think about it like, if I wanted to put something in a long email to staff, perhaps it's better, instead of an email, let me think about it like an email that I can write very quickly, but instead I'm going to put it to a space where it can easily be returned to, and it can be logged and people can look things up. So I was never someone that was coming into things creating stuff for the purpose of other people reading it. It was really about me tracking what I was doing and modeling that I was tracking what I was doing and getting out my ideas. That then led to me putting myself a little bit more out there, because I think it's tough to have a personal blog. I think there are pieces in the book that talk about some of that, right? The idea of collaboration around things. That idea of doing it on your own, I mean, it's the same as me just like putting anything else out there into the ether. So I started applying to, when you do stuff for bigger things. A year ago, I had a colleague across the hall say, you know what, you should put in to write for Edutopia. He had a friend at the time that was doing it. And so I followed their protocols. I put stuff in. My idea got accepted. And it was the first real time that I had an editor look at something, proof what I was looking at. I got feedback on it. It was a very different process than a personal blog post. That then led to more writing over the last year. And I would say what I often find for blogging, for writing of any kind, is that you need thought partners, you need people giving you feedback, you need an interaction. Or again, it feels like I've just put something out there that is for me, that's more like a journal. So I feel like it is a practice like no other one. So perhaps when I think about doing it, maybe in my school or in my district, I don't advertise it there, to be honest with you. Like I love where I work, but I often worry about feeling like, oh, I don't want to look like I'm tooting my own horn, or like, you know, there goes Stephanie again. She's trying things in her classroom, that tech person. So I want people to feel safe to try without this idea that there is a comparison to me or what I'm doing, and instead feel inspired by other people's practices. So my workaround for that is that I talk about trying things that I've asked teachers to try, and then I highlight other people who are trying them in their classrooms, and I try to bring in other voices in particular things. I don't know. I think it's a fine line, but I would like to be able to bring in more people. I have thought about the relationship between voice and writing, and trying to do things where you record people and write. Everyone has a different way in. So some people feel like they can listen to a thing. Some people feel like they can look at a thing, or they can look at a really small tweet. I have found that my in between for all of these is more of an infographic. So thinking about how to utilize different forms of media. So if I have most of my content in something graphic, or in a sketch note, or some other way to put it out there. And then for those who want a longer, deeper write, they can read, or some people who want to listen, there's options. I just feel like not everything's going to be appealing to everyone, and I need ways in to connect people.
To add to that idea is the great communication theorist Marshall McLuhan. And this idea originated in the 60s, and it's probably the most significant line that he's remembered for. The medium is the message. Just as important as what you say is the means in which you communicate it to your audience. And, you know, like it's, for example, like if that request for you, like as a coach, like, okay, you get called in and you have to substitute for a class because the sub ain't coming in, and the teacher called in with like 10 minutes before school starts, and you're going in there. Do you want that as a text message? Do you want that as a phone call? Do you want that as an email? Because I could tell you from a personal perspective, I'd much rather it be a phone call so that I can get more detail and I know, okay, this is what we have to do. It's more clear. I'm losing less time back and forth. I know I've got to get it on there. When we are sharing these ideas, as important as the ideas are that we want to share, is knowing who we want to support is going to receive them in a meaningful context. And it's not always a blog post. I think understanding that, we have this network beyond our network is a valuable resource. I've always felt that it's okay to self-promote and put yourself out there as somebody who has great ideas, because it may rankle some people the wrong way, but it also connects to a lot of other educators who know then that when you do great things, you get noticed and it's very visible. And I know that there's a population in education who does not want to be seen, that are perfectly fine, having everything shut down and self-contained. But at the same time, there's another generation of educators coming through it. And that visibility and that networking is how they interact. And it's fine. And so I think that the connection between podcasting and blogging and writing, Stephanie, that you mentioned, one of the things I notice about like a lot of podcast culture is that they very much support each other. Like if I have a podcast and I invite these 3 other people to come on my show, well, guess what? Now I'm going to go on to their shows as well. And so everybody always has a special guest because they're always inviting each other. And when it comes to writing, and blog posting and educators, tweeting and retweeting, that's really what it is. It's demonstrating those connections so that you are able to bring more in to share with the people that you support more directly. And I think that that's a part of leadership, is being visible, is sharing these ideas and allowing others to come into that circle so that you can bring anything from the outside. Because frankly, we are that extension. Like we are those connections to the broader field of education, because teaching is such an insular profession, unfortunately. And very rarely, even though we have all these means to do so, do teachers really seek to expand beyond their immediate kind of social networks as far as other educators. And so it's important, I think, for us to be visible, because it's going to encourage others to extend out as well. If we can do it, really anybody else could.
Yeah, really good points. And I, as someone who, isn't super like out there quite yet, like still working on, who I am as a coach and an educator, and, navigating this journey and learning from others. Blogging for me at this point in time is more so that opportunity, I think, to reflect on my own like understanding and learning. And so I think there are various levels of blogging and podcasting and really creating. But for me, I know, like I she mentions that like on 147 that if she was going to spend so much time researching and like iterating, then there should be a moment to stop and reflect on that. And I really feel like that is valuable. And a lot of, the responses here on this question here, from Francis and Sharon, etc., even Jared, like this idea that it is therapeutic, it is cathartic, it is an opportunity for us to open the door, to celebrate. And so Sharon, I'm actually going to ask you, you mentioned in the chat, I also like it as a place for teachers to be highlighted. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on like how you have used it that way, and like what has the reception been?
Let me find my mic here.
Okay.
I think it's really important that if we can share and celebrate their successes. And a lot of times one of my old bosses would always want us every month we had to kind of glean good news and celebrations. And so it was a great way of, I would be writing that up for her and I could go ahead and just put it out there. I didn't always put it on a blog, but I would put it in different newsletters and different ways that we could share. And a lot of times we would find out that would help other people, maybe in the same grade level, maybe in another school, but in the same grade, that, hey, that's a great idea. Let's see where we can go from there. What I found was a lot of teachers were like, well, this isn't anything special. I'm just teaching. I'm just doing what I need to do. And I'm like, but you don't understand. It is special. And what you're doing, you're being very reflective and you're taking care of your students' needs. And we need to celebrate that. And so that's the kind of stuff that I would try to do. I think in my little write-up, I was, I really struggle with words. I mean, I'm kind of more of a math brain, sciencey brain problem solver than a wordsmith. And so I would get started, and I mean, I'd really work hard on it. And by the time I got something written, it might have been a whole week later and it wasn't relevant to the time, or, so the time that I would spend on trying to be super reflective or inspirational or anything just wasn't working for me. And so one of my other tech coordinators at another school, she just started posting anything that she would put out there as an email. She would just post it to her blog. And so it was a place for her teachers to come and get the information so they didn't have to search for the email or that. And then I found that it really was a great way for me to go back and reflect what I've been doing. So that's kind of where I've settled with it. I love some of these ideas that folks are talking about. I do think we all need a place to reflect. I have a 16-year-old, and when COVID first started, I'm like, you need to keep a journal, because this is the time of your life you're going to go look back and go, gosh, what did I do during COVID? What was I feeling? What was I going through? And I've really started thinking that at this point, I kind of feel like, you can go back and reflect, hey, how did we handle this first 6 months with it? Where were we feeling? We've been in emergency mode for a long period. Now it looks like, hey, this is just going to be reality for a while. So, how can we make this reality the best we can? And writing can help do that. I wish I was more consistent about it.
But I think you bring up an interesting point, is that you found a way that you were comfortable with expressing it, because you tried writing it out and it wasn't like necessarily something you felt comfortable with, that, from that math science perspective. I always tell students, when we start doing writing and we want to work on writing skills, we always talk about writing to, our best writing comes from a comfortable topic, right? Like if you ask me to lay out a 5-paragraph essay on the navigated back and forth perspectives of nuclear quantum theory, forget it. It's going to be trash. I wouldn't want you to read that. It's going to be laughable. But if you give me a topic that I've lived and experienced firsthand, I'm going to be able to write chapters if it's in a method that I'm comfortable with. When I talk to students about writing, I tell them that you don't have to be an expert, but you have to have an idea. However, if you want to write like an expert, write about yourself. Because, kids, you are the world's foremost expert on you. You've been there since day one, every moment, asleep and awake. Nobody else understands what's going on in your mind because they didn't live it. You have the opportunity to write better about you than literally anybody else on the planet. And when it comes to our perspective, nobody else is going to be able to write that better than you. So think about how you're best able to express the story of you and what you see. And you're going to be able to bring that in a way that nobody else can. So find that method. Absolutely. And if it's a blog, or if it's a podcast, or if it's a video that you can put out, if it's a tweet, if it's that little section in the school newsletter that your principal made you contribute to because they need filler and they need to satisfy an area administrator or a superintendent, whatever. If it's what you do well, live there, because that's your space. It's your voice. And don't try to make it sound like anybody else's. One of the best things I got feedback for during my time this past week that surprised a lot of people was when I got more comfortable and I started picking up a little bit my Staten Island accent again. Because that's something I lost a long time ago, because I felt like I had to conform into this kind of clarity. I felt like it was going to set me back a little bit as far as being different from everybody else in my immediate community. But because I was so comfortable in that setting, I dropped any type of pretense and I was who I was. And I was always worried about how that would be received. And it was really comforting to see that. So whatever your voice is, whatever your expertise is, whatever your strong point is, that's how you start. That's how you deliver it. And that's how you make yourself more visible so that other people can see what you bring to the table and how it can benefit them.
Absolutely. And there's been some great insight in the chat as well. Ideas about, the best. Steph kind of mentioned the best ones are the ones that just flow out of her. Sit with she has so many that she just sits there with the first paragraph and, waits for those aha writings. But I think sometimes, and Jenny mentioned, just get it out and then you can go back and refine. I think we are so critical of ourselves and the statements that we make because we don't think that they're perfect, but just like our kids, we got to help them process, right? And it's the same is true for ourselves and for our educators. also mentioned, I don't want to just gloss over before we move on, but Jared mentioned that he has a teacher who's he's encouraging to share what he's doing in the classroom, but still apprehensive about sharing. Jared, would you just share with us a little bit about like how you are helping that teacher along, maybe encouraging them in that?
Yeah, sure. So he's been using Pear Deck a lot, and so he's been doing some great things with it. And so I've been trying to encourage him to share out his story, because his biggest hang up is, why aren't more teachers using this in our building? And I said, that's a question I keep asking too, and keep trying to encourage, but everybody's kind of in their own little bubbles here. So, so I was trying to encourage him just to, maybe give a shout out through email, hey, try this, or, things like that, or sharing a faculty meeting and things like where he's just not comfortable yet speaking to the whole group. So I told him, I said, well, do you mind if I come in, take some pictures? We'll share them out on Twitter. We'll tag the school in it. And so he was good with that. And then I'm trying to encourage him in the next world language department meeting to try to encourage him to speak out a little bit more on how he's using it, and try to see if we can get more teachers on board, because he's like, I'll never use paper again, which is, a great ringing endorsement for the tool, because he's found something that he loves. It's working. It frees him up. So it's great. He's being able to provide feedback directly to the kids. It's everything that tool was designed to do. And so it's just great to see him excited about it. It's just trying to get him to share more of his story, because, I can preach all day about using something. But, sometimes it falls flat, and I know having his voice in it would be a big help. And, talking about, writing and things like that, I've tried different formats. I've tried blogging, I've tried email blasts, I've tried this, that, or the other. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe you guys can help me with this. A better method to kind of get a message out there to teachers, because teachers, at least in my building, feel a little overwhelmed with emails. They're a little bit too busy to check social media posts. Twitter's a great one. And I try to encourage teachers who aren't comfortable writing blogs to just tweet out short little blurbs, pictures, successes, things like that. But kind of the world we live in and just how overwhelmed they are, I feel like messages are kind of falling flat, and faculty meetings are harder and harder because they're more on Zoom than they are in person. So just finding that to be a challenge right now.
I've seen Flipgrid being utilized more at the professional development level for educators, because it's digestible and it gives everybody a chance to see each other, and it allows administrators to provide meaningful feedback in a fairly efficient manner with a reasonable time frame. So that's one. I guess the question I would ask is, yeah, email can be very overwhelming, but, what have you identified is the most receptive means of communication that your teachers respond to? And, frankly, that's going to be very fragmented, because demographically, people, just outside of just education, people prefer different forms of, you're going to have teachers that respond better to text, that respond better to emails. You're going to have teachers that would rather just hear a phone call, just a connection, a one-on-one. That might be something to kind of Rolodex or keep a track of separately, so that when you do reach out, it's not something that simply you do just to document that you tried to help. But, that's what salespeople do. They keep track of those little things as far as like how people are best interacted with. And so if you have a staff that you can manage, start to kind of ask around about that. That might be a good survey question. What is your most preferred means of interaction and communication? And you're going to be surprised at what you see, but you're going to have that information on a personal level.
Absolutely. Really good stuff. Go ahead, Jared.
No, I said that's a good idea. Thank you, Devin. I appreciate that.
Number one thing I learned in working in marketing and media was, reach people where they are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So we're just, for time's sake, going to continue on. Really good stuff. Chapter 13 is awesome. And so is chapter 14 and 15. Some really great ideas in the chat. So if you guys will check those out as well. So chapter 14 is all about staying inspired and finding support. Kind of goes back to, our first conversation when we started off, this idea of, being reflective and really being there as a support system for our coaches, for our educators across the board, not only our educators, but also our coach colleagues. So question number 2, I liked her use of language here. She mentioned Ellen Porter once said, all great adventures have moments that are really crap. And I felt like that was like so real and raw. And it's really, she kind of mentioned that you need to find a way to keep going through that crap. Like it's not going to not be there. So we have to kind of push through. So the question was, this coaching journey isn't always going to be about one that is full of positive moments. I mean, we all can attest to that. When you find yourself faced with challenging experiences, from where do you draw your inspiration? And what are some tips you can share to help other coaches keep the course despite the difficulties? Would anybody like to start us off?
I'll jump in here. I think this kind of leads into the next one too. But for me, it's all about building up that PLN. And so for the past few years, my PLN was just the other coaches within my district. And I actually found like I was growing. I can't say I wasn't growing, but I wasn't growing very much because we weren't getting any outside ideas. And so this year, each challenge that I ran into while coaching, like I know I have people to reach out to. And before I try on new ideas, I mean, Shannon, you've seen many of my random ideas, but I ask like, okay, well, what do you think of this? How would this help? Because we do get stuck. I had one teacher who was just, her challenge went from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to like everything was her challenge. And then when it really came down to it, it was, no, we actually just need to pick the essential standards to focus on in ELA, and we can start driving instruction that way. Like we went from so broad, everything in the book, to finally being able to narrow it down. But when it was so broad, I honestly felt like I was not helping her. And like she was going to end the journey and just be like, thank you for wasting my time. But now we had to cancel one of our meetings this week. And she was like, so do I get 2 meetings with you next week then? Like, well, sure. But it was nice because I'm like, okay, at least that validates the fact that she really does enjoy this. But it all comes from having a connection with people that I can reach out to when I run into issues. And so I know the open chat has helped me with that.
Absolutely. Tiffany put in the chat, we have the moral and ethical imperative to create entry and access points for all students, and that requires being comfortable in discomfort. Out of chaos can come the greatest ideas and opportunities. And I think that is so profound. And I don't know if, Tiffany, you're in a place where you can elaborate a little bit on that, but we'd love for you to maybe give some perspective on that. I know that you're writing in the chat, so I'm assuming maybe you don't have the capacity to share out loud.
While she's finishing that, if she's responding in the chat, I'll kind of fill some of the space here. I did a blog post about how being honest about your own struggles is going to help others buy into their own. So, I'll tell a story, and I'll kind of read from what I have here. I just brought it up. As a young sports fan growing up in Staten Island, I fell asleep each night to the sounds of the games on the radio. I was fascinated by the stage provided by all parties. And as someone who excelled in school and constantly sought challenges, I envisioned a dream as a broadcaster. I worked hard to convince my parents to put me in the best schools they could, leading to an acceptance to Northeastern University, where I got to live out my passion through a degree in communication studies and involvement in the sports department at the studio radio station. And I was able to dive right into the world of pro sports at this time as a producer for the top billing sports talk station in the country, where I worked to cover some of the most significant American sports moment of the early 21st century. And I parlayed this experience into a job in California as a pro hockey announcer with the Bakersfield Condors. I lived my dream. And through teaching, I can convey that buying into education can still turn ambition into reality. What a garbage story that is, ladies and gentlemen. Like, really, like that's just like so self-inflating, and it really leaves out so much of what I had to go through to get to that point. I didn't involve a single point of failure. We're afraid to share that because we feel like it diminishes our own narrative. I left out so much about my struggles with depression and anxiety, about a lot of the home challenges I faced growing up in Staten Island, in dealing with a lot of domestic abuse issues that I had to witness. I left out a lot of the classes that I failed, the fact that I just basically scraped in due to a technicality, the fact that I was basically let go after my first year in my dream job. Without those failures, those struggles, those challenges, those stories of triumph and achievement and accomplishment are just self-inflating. So it's really important to make sure that we are able to highlight the struggles. In fact, there's a lot of great research. I was at NCTM back in 2017, and one of the keynotes was a study from Columbia University where when you give science students stories about great scientists and their failures and their struggles, those students are more likely to persevere and work through their own struggles. And it leads to higher academic achievement. The failures, the struggles are the most important part. And if you leave them out and only just highlight on the successes and the things that worked great, you leave out the things that failed, all you're doing is creating a self-mythology. And it's just an echo chamber of this communication that ability is inherent.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Tiffany, would you like to elaborate for us? It was such a great point you made.
I definitely will. But first I want to just piggyback off of David, and to the point, I too love the broadcast voice, but I'm the parent of 2 dyslexic children. And one of the things I realized very early on that was going to be critical to their success was helping them to understand that while different, they were not less. And I did that by showing them all of the great people who had dyslexia and how they accomplished it by using their strengths. So to that point, I was working at the Department of Education when the book Failure is Not an Option was released. And I thought to myself, what a joke that this is. Not only is it an option, it is a reality, and it is not about whether or not we're going to fail. It's about how we get up and move forward from the failures. So David, thank you for sharing that. Just an amazing point. And to piggyback on what I posted, most of us who do what we do, to David's earlier point about those of us who show up here are passionate, we're committed, we're dedicated. We believe that education is not just a job. It is something that we were called to do. I can't remember who said or who made the quote that those who can teach those who can do and those who can't teach. And it's just the opposite. Those of us who teach do so because we could do anything else. I can't tell you the things I'm told you should have gone. I get tired of denying law school applications. I've even been asked, come and go to law school. So we know we can do anything else, but this is a calling. And to that, there is the moral and ethical imperative, because it's not Toyota. We're not putting out cars or parts as an inline, so that if something goes wrong, you recall it, you fix it, you put it back out, and it's good as new. We have lives in our hand, and where they end up, we are going to have a responsibility. And I will just say this as a believer, and I'm not proselytizing here, but I'm going to answer to a much higher power than my principal, the superintendent, the district leadership. I'm going to have to answer to God for the lives that came in front of me. So it's not that I don't care about adults, but we've been given the opportunities, and we had the chance to make whatever of them. We owe it to the children that we encounter, whether we're teaching them directly, coaching their teachers, their school leaders, to help create those entry and access points for all of them. Equity is not an add-on. It's a fundamental responsibility of the educator to ensure those opportunities no matter what. And I'm going to be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a really wonderful insight. Always, we really appreciate your voice and everything that you have to share in that.
That was great, Tiffany. That was great. I'm glad you brought up Toyota too, because I feel like it touches upon something that's kind of coming around in education. And I don't know how to feel about this, because I'm going to push back against it. The 5 whys. So if anybody has heard of the process of the 5 whys as far as problem solving, it's the idea that you find an issue by asking why, and you don't blame a person. You don't bring a person. You blame a process or a technical component. And it comes from Toyota, from the engineering on the assembly line. So for example, if a mechanism on the assembly line isn't slow, so like you ask the engineer, so why is this slowing down? Well, it's because we're not able to get the conveyor belt moving along as quickly. Well, why can't we get the conveyor belt moving along as quickly? Well, because every now and then we have to slow it down to repair the lubricant on the ball bearing. So why do we have to repair the lubricant on the ball bearing? So because it's starting to dry out when this happens. Well, why is it starting to dry? So by the time you ask 5 of those why questions on the process, you've addressed something that you can take action on. That's actually pretty small, but will have a bigger impact. And that's picked up some steam as far as organizational processing. And it's starting to come into education. And I push back against it because in education, it's not always a mechanism. It's not always a system. It's not always an organizational structure. It is the relationship. It is the personal struggle. It is something challenging that we don't always have the tools to be able to address. And I feel like if we try to strip that away, and I know that everybody always talks about the importance of relationships, but do we do so out of kind of buzziness, just like we have with growth mindset or grace? Or do we do so because we recognize from a purely professional standpoint that it is the mechanism that allows progress to move forward? So I'm really glad that you brought that up, Tiffany.
Absolutely. And just to that point, if we're going to spin our wheels asking why about processes, who's in control of the processes? So now we're saying the ball bearings are greater than the person who created them, that the conveyor belt knows more than we do. So now we're elevating the thing over who we are and what our responsibility is. And at some point, that's stripping away accountability and responsibility. So when the process is that the ball bearing snaps and the axle breaks in the middle of highway traffic, then who becomes responsible for that person's life being lost? So we've removed that. And I know I'm going way off on a tangent, but I'm more of a conspiracy realist than a theorist. It just is what it is.
Awesome points. Love it all. Good thoughts. I really appreciate like that. And that brings us really beautifully to our next question, actually. Magira talks about this idea of divergent thinking and how, surrounding ourselves with divergent thinkers, maybe those that don't align 100% with our perspective, is always like kind of a good thing, right? Because it pushes us and asks us to question, not necessarily in an effort to change our perspective or our journey, but it makes us think about things. So, how do you guys feel about this? What is the value of surrounding yourself, in your opinion, with divergent thinkers? And like, from my perspective, I know that some of my educators struggle with that, right? Because sometimes hearing a different truth is challenging. So how do we encourage them to understand the power in and the value in divergent thinking?
I often think about it. I think that the word divergent makes you think that it is like oppositional, and I don't think of it that way. And so I think that a different perspective does not mean that they are in opposition of one another. It might be through a different lens. It might be that they are coming at it from a different perspective. But I think if our objectives are similar, if similar to what Tiffany was saying, if at the heart of it, our goal is on supporting students, supporting staff, then we're coming from the same place, right? Like our intentions, our mission is the same. How we get there might be different. The way that we think about going about it might be different. And perhaps I can learn something from those ideas, right? That I already know what I have to say, which is often why I prefer to wait to speak, right? That I already know my perspective. So it would help me, it would behoove me, it would only help me grow if I can listen to as many people as possible to inform decisions that I'm going to make, because my decisions impact other people. They impact staff, they then impact students, they impact district office personnel, right? Like they will impact others. So if I am not able to actually open myself up to understanding and learning from their perspectives, then I am making decisions that are uninformed. And I also think that it serves me better. I use the term thought partners. That is how I work. I work with having and bringing in thought partners on pretty much everything that I do and every decision that I make. And I think I am better for it. I know that they help me. They help me question myself when there are things that I cannot always see. And I need that other perspective. I need those other voices, because otherwise I'm only making decisions with myself in mind. And that isn't fair if I am a person that speaks for more than me when decisions are supposed to be made.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that that's really a bright point. Devin, you have something to add?
I'm absolutely going to add to that and throw this idea out there as far as like who I listen to the most. As much as, I listen to, a diverse array, and I try to follow educators from around the world. I want to have a global perspective so I can, think globally and act locally. But as far as things that I bring to my teachers, the ones I listen to the most are my newest teachers. And I know that teacher ed programs always are getting hammered hard as far as, what they're preparing teachers to do. But a lot of times I see new teachers doing wonderful things, and it's because they're coming from those programs. And if these are wonderful things that they're doing right now, those are the things that I need my more veteran teachers to see, because a lot of times they are not the most like technologically proficient educators. They're teachers that are just finding best practices that work with students. They're able to make those connections. And whether it's because of its general proximity to students, it's something that works. And a lot of times it's funny to hear with those veterans, oh, it's just because they like them more. Well, yeah. So let's find out why. And if it's something that you can replicate or at least kind of bring into your practices, then why is that necessarily such a bad thing? And it's a way for newer teachers to feel like they're doing something right, because a lot of times those newer teachers are the ones that are most on the cusp of leaving the profession altogether. And yeah, a lot of energy is focused on support and compliance and a lot of these in-service programs. But really, let's let these newer teachers feel like they can be leaders in our field so we don't lose them. And so their voices are the ones I try to seek out more than anybody else, because they're going to have the greatest opportunity to diffuse upwards towards our more veterans, so they can feel like they're constantly on the cusp of practices that have meaningful impact instead of something that the district just imposes on everybody. I seek newer voices.
I think that's great. I think that's awesome. And I think that I think that this space is a great space for coaches, right? Because there are so many different perspectives. And we can learn from each other. I've learned so much over the course of this book study and in the chat. And, different perspectives are really important for growth. Any other thoughts on this idea? We're winding down kind of to the end of the hour. I want to be mindful of time. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and skip down to question 5 real quick. We'll kind of touch on this and then we'll wrap it up. So she had in chapter 15, which was our final chapter. Mind you, if you have not read chapter 14, I encourage you to do so, because it's all about like this idea of a play date and a 3-date rule, really giving teachers a space to interact with the tech that you guys are collaboratively kind of coming up with as a solution for lesson planning. And it's really rich the way that she lays it out, and it's kind of that process. But in chapter 15, our final chapter, it's the culminating kind of chapter of her book. That's like all about, okay, what's next? Now that we started our journey and we moved through this process, ultimately, like, we need to start planning our next adventure. And she lays out these different kind of tips and tricks to kind of get us moving to our next adventure, teachers and coaches alike. And ideas like be your own hero, don't get comfortable, channel your inner student, share your crazy pills, which I thought was funny. But I was wondering, for those of you that did read, which of these sections, or those of you that didn't, which of those headers really like resonate with you? How will we be mindful as we strive to be our own hero? What steps will we carry out to ensure that we don't get comfortable in this process? or too comfortable rather, how will you model joy? And she talks about channeling your inner student to do so. And then finally, do you plan to share your crazy pills? Like ultimately all this insight that we've learned, how are we going to share it with the world and really enhance the lives of others? Sharon says she loves the crazy pill idea. You want to elaborate on that for us, Sharon?
Well, I just, I think I'd written down that the two that really struck me was don't get comfortable, and also the idea of constantly keeping it fun, those kind of ideas. But just the idea that, yeah, we are kind of crazy. I'm sitting here on a Veterans Day and, could be doing a lot of other things, but really this is bringing me joy to be with you guys and to hear more and to learn from everybody. So the learning is so good on here. I will say that I've been teaching for a long time and been a tech coordinator for 25 years, which is a long time in this business. And so if you don't just keep pushing yourself to get out of your comfort zone and to, be uncomfortable and go, I can't do that. And then it's like, wait, the minute I say that, I need to go for it. Brene Brown's, leadership books and some of those kind of ideas about being uncomfortable and being vulnerable has just been something that has come across my plate the last couple of years. And that's kind of where, instead of winding down, I'm just winding up, I think. So we're going from there.
Awesome. Thank you for that share. Would anybody else like to add into this? Give some good insight to the final recording of Courageous Adventures?
I share it. No, I put in, Sharon, I completely agree with you, but I stuck more with the don't get too comfortable, because I think that for me has just always been where I've been at. I mean, I've taught in 4 different states and I clearly have not gotten too comfortable anywhere because I keep moving. But I do like how it mentions, like, you do actually need to take a moment to celebrate where you've gone, like celebrate those successes, but don't let that be the end of your journey. Keep going and keep growing. And like, what did you take from this? And how are you going to push yourself forward? I had a professor in my grad program who she would always say, once you feel comfortable and once you start feeling bored, like, you need to move on. Whether your position is teacher, principal, superintendent, if you start feeling comfortable and you feel like, I did it, I got where I needed to go, then that's your time to move on. You need to find something new because you've either lost your passion or you're no longer showing that growth mindset.
I think there's a fine balance between being comfortable and being bored. I think when
That's
you're
true.
bored, that's when you ask, what now? When you're comfortable, it's okay to ask what's next, but you can still have that lens about what's next being down the line. So you can take a chance to appreciate and commit to seeing that development and long-term growth. It's okay to continue to develop your practices and grow, as long as it's not to the detriment of everything else going around right now. And it's, I think it's one of those things that we have to be careful with this mindset of never be comfortable. If you are never going to be comfortable, then what is all this for? You have to understand that there's a point where I'm doing something good, and it's okay to enjoy doing something well, as long as we leverage that into allowing others to do something well before we leave it behind. So find that balance and make sure that you recognize, more than anything else, that you are good enough, and it's okay to be good enough.
Absolutely. That's a really good reminder. I think you're absolutely right. One last piece, I just really want to touch on this idea of like finding joy, like channeling your inner student. Because I think right now, a lot of us, wherever we are across the world, there's a lot of pressure on educators and coaches. And sometimes I think we, with such limited time or such the constraints and limitations that exist because of COVID teaching, we forget that we need to have fun. that like it can't always be grind, because really truly like our students are the ones that are going to suffer in that regard. And if as a coach we're constantly pushing, and aren't consciously making moments of joy, it's creating moments of joy, then I think that is, we're doing a disservice. We're doing a disservice to ourselves, to our educators that we're coaching, and ultimately to the students that they're going to continue to impact. And so, yeah, I agree. Jared has posted that this group brings him joy. #inspiring. And I agree with you, Melissa. Same. I feel that way too. And I'm really grateful that we have this time together, and that we were able to share. And I think it's really rich when we can come together and enjoy each other's company. Before we kind of round it out, are there any last words for the good of the order before we close?
Thank
All
you,
right.
Shannon.
Yeah.
I want to thank you and Georgina. I know you're going to be watching later. Both of you for putting together the slide decks, the questions, for moderating. That's a lot of work that you both took on to make this book study happen. So a huge shout out to both of you for keeping the excitement going, for keeping this going, and supporting us all along the way of reading Courageous Adventures. So.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, yes, it's a lot of work, but there's so much growth that comes out of it. And it's like one of the, being stuck at home and teaching virtually, it's a good bright spot to be able to share these insights with the world and really engage with you guys. So it's been a lot of fun.
I've been able to take this model and use it with another group that I'm working with. And so it's been awesome, and they were very receptive of it. So that's the kind of stuff I want to see that my teachers are able to do. So just wanted to share that on with you guys, that this is impacting more than just the small group. We bring it out and we keep pushing it forward, and it can impact a lot of people. So thank you so much. I really have enjoyed being able to reflect on the questions if I have time to go back and do it, but then also take this time to chat. So really nice to see everybody.
Absolutely. And for those of you watching and those of you that are with us now, if something in your soul is like pushing you to say, I maybe want to lead the next Courageous Adventure round for all of our coaches that didn't get a chance to join this book study, reach out to Becky or myself or Georgina so that we can get you equipped with the slide deck so that you can be the one leading the conversation next time. Because I think that now that we've done this together, let's go ahead and share that with everybody else. So let us know. We would love to bring you along on that journey. Well, with that being said, I want to go ahead and close out. I want to be mindful of time. Thank you guys so much for this experience, for this, for today, for the insight that was shared. If you're watching on the recording, spread it forward, and let's go ahead and keep the conversation going. And I appreciate all of you and hope you have a good day.
Enjoy, everybody. Take care.